Hi and welcome to the Superpower Mentor podcast, the first episode. And I am Mads, the host for today. And I'm here with Courtney. Hi, Courtney.
Hi, I'm Courtney, and I'm so excited to be here. Thanks for inviting me.
My pleasure. So our plan today, Courtney, is we're going to talk about the school system. But before we talk about the school system, I want to talk about you. Who are you?
Perfect. I'm Courtney Dobbertin. I currently live in Clearwater, Florida. I grew up in upstate New York, a small town, or I guess it's the third largest town in upstate New York is Rochester, New York. So that's where I grew up. So very much changed from the cold climate of, mostly snow most of the year to then sunny, hot, humid weather. So yeah, that's me. And then I'm here at Superpower Mentors podcast because I just happen to have a superpower of ADHD.
And how long have you been mentoring for?
So I've been mentoring. With Superpower Mentors, I've been mentoring since probably about March timeframe of this year. So March 2024. But I've been working in other capacities of supporting other people, whether they have neurodiverse superpowers or not. I love to be, I call myself the hype cheerleader. I love being a hype
nice.
person. I love being a cheerleader. I love supporting others. So it just was a beautiful fit to become a part of Superpower Mentors.
Nice. What do you do? Like, what is your passion and things in life?
Yeah, so I love the environment. I love the ocean. I am a volunteer scuba diver at the Florida Aquarium in Tampa, Florida. So I get to get into the exhibits and clean. I get to be a glorified janitor, underwater janitor, where I get to clean the tanks and hang out with the fish. I always see something. We have our sand tiger sharks that are swimming around. We have some sea turtles. We have some moray eels, all sorts of really cool creatures that I get to hang out with. And so I volunteer there. When I'm not donning the regulator and mask, I am in the environmental field, whether it be doing mapping like GIS, geographical information systems,
Thank you.
or or helping with being a personal assistant for a few friends. I'm working with them and doing some really, really cool stuff with them. On top of that, I am a moderator for Girls That Scuba. We're the largest female only and non-binary and trans. Basically, anybody that's not cis het male is a part of this group, and we are 75 plus thousand members worldwide. Yeah, so I am moderating posts with other moderators. We're a very small but mighty team, and
sounds quite big to me.
It is, yeah, it's a huge team, or it's a huge group. But we're about 5 people, and we're all around the world, and we're helping people get advice that they might need or not feel like they can ask in a male-dominated space. So that's what I do, and I've been doing that for probably a lot of different things. I love putting my hands in all the different paint buckets.
Same. I think we both are on the same, like doing loads of different things.
Yeah.
So who am I? I am Mads. I am from Norway. I have dyslexia and dyscalculia, and I am one of the longest mentors or longest. I've been mentoring the longest. One of those who've been mentoring the longest. I started 2020, September 2020. So it's been a while. And I'm a illustrator and animator. So how I got into the special educational field was I made a short film about dyslexia for my bachelor. And then I took special education master after that. And I live now creating art and create art about social challenges, mental health challenges, special educational need challenges, and anything in between. And I travel around Norway and more plus countries, more and more at least, to share and communicate and support individuals with special educational needs. And
I love that. That's so cool.
So and also I then make a lot of videos about this subject as well. So and I do you can call it some sort of mental health or trauma therapy. I do a lot of loads of different things within like helping people, basically. So loads of cool things. But today we're going to talk about the school system. So what do you think about the school system, Courtney?
I think it depends on the individual. I really
Okay.
think that it depends on what their needs are, what works for them, what doesn't. I think that the question that we need to ask a lot and that is not being asked is how do people learn? I think that that's something that is really important. I know that my sister and I both we're only 14 months apart. I have another younger sister. But her and I attended different high schools
Mm.
because of just our learning differences and because of what her needs were compared to mine. Um, we didn't actually see each other in high school at all because we went to different schools, but it was just different learning styles. And so I think that understanding the child, understanding the adult, because both are
Absolutely.
important, is important to know of this, for learning in school systems. So yeah, I think that it's a hard question to
It's
answer
a
because I think
massive one.
it's definitely a massive one, and thinking more again about the individual themselves. And
I
I
love
don't
that
think we
answer.
ask that question very often of learning. How do we learn?
That's literally what the majority of my public speaking and everything I talk about is like, how do you learn? Look,
Yeah,
and that maybe that sounds very big to say, but like pretty much every problem with these challenges that we have can be solved with understanding how you learn and
agreed.
compensate for that.
Absolutely.
But in your case, then I'm curious, like, how does your sister learn in comparison to you?
I don't necessarily know how she learns, but she is very much more tactile. So
Mm.
she's an X-ray technician actually. So she does a lot more things with her hands.
Mm.
She does a lot more of on her feet. She's moving a lot. Before she was that, she was a massage therapist.
Mm.
So a lot more kinesthetic is her way of thinking. And again, she's learning mostly about the human body. So
Yeah.
things that we can feel, touch, know, all of that. My other sister, I'm the only one who's not in like the health field. My other sister is a
Well,
physical
you kind of
therapist.
are though.
I
Isn't
guess
this health field?
I guess so. It's the one you can't always
The
see, right?
extended one.
It's the extended one.
Yeah.
Um, so yeah, they both are more of that kinesthetic.
Mm.
They like to work with people. They like to work with the body. They like to work with those structures. So I think that yeah, my sisters and I, and again, my sister who's 7 years younger than I
Mm.
am, like she grew up in a different sort of society than my sister who's
That's
14
very
months
important
younger
for
than I.
later. Yeah, yeah, yeah.
Yeah, yeah. So, I would say that my sister's more of a kinesthetic learner
What
from
about
what
you
I
then?
can observe. Ooh,
How do you
I
learn?
love yeah. So it's funny because a little bit ago, I was a technical trainer, so teaching people how adults learn.
Mm.
So I had to think a lot about that, of what those skill sets were. I would say mostly visual. I like lots of different things. So I like visual and auditory, and sometimes I think it's all a combination. I don't
Of
think we can
course.
just be, oh, I'm just a
Of
kinesthetic, I'm
course.
just a visual. I would say if you were to give me instructions auditorially, that's not my jam.
Mm.
That's not where I will understand things.
The
I really need
combination.
to read. Yeah, I need the combination. I need to read through instructions. I need to kind of be like, okay, I did this, I did this, I did this. So visual. I'm definitely more of that visual, spatial um person.
Again, I
Yeah.
think that's very common with these diagnoses because I am the same. I need it visually, and I need to be in movement, but I also need to
Hmm.
listen. And obviously, the school system didn't really
Yeah.
understand that, and I think that's one of the big problems because you're not acknowledged, you're not fitting into that box, regardless of what type of school you are going to.
Sure.
But I think there is many of these teachers doesn't even know themselves how they learn, and that's not really a question. Like you need to do this, and there is nothing in between. That makes it
Right.
difficult, and I think this is why I love like I'm a big fan of Montessori schools, for example. Do you know?
Hmm.
Yeah,
Yeah. Oh yeah. Oh yeah.
it's like my dream of how the school system should be in general. But that's not without problems either, of course. But I think they have the right mindset because they allow you to kind of grow independently.
Yes. Yes. Yeah, and that's actually something that My partner and I were, if we're to have children, we've definitely talked about that
Mm.
of, what sort of homeschooling is it homeschooling? Is it Montessori? Is it like other, aspects? We think a lot about that,
Mm.
about the education system and about how would it look like,
Mm.
especially you're talking about nowadays too. It's very different, very, very different. Do you want to talk about that question too of kind of how the school system, how it might have changed from
Oh
now
yeah,
to
yeah. But before
yeah,
we go into that, because
sure.
we were kind of on the topic of like
Yeah,
private
okay.
versus homeschool versus public school, because Montessori is usually private school, right?
Sure, sure.
Um, so it's like, but homeschooling is pretty big in America.
Yeah, I think it's getting a lot bigger specifically because of COVID,
Yeah.
right? Because that basically was what happened. And I know that that's worldwide too, but
Mm.
specifically in America, from the trends that I've seen, is a lot of people have noticed,
Mm.
oh my gosh, there's so much that goes into teaching. There's
Mm.
so much that goes into education. And so the parents in particular got kind of that view, that personalized view of what it's like to be in their child's classroom, right? Like they don't,
Yes.
unless you're in the
Yes.
PTA, the Parent Teacher Association, unless you're in, volunteering in your child's school, you're not seeing that viewpoint. You're not, and it's even more so when you get to high school and further, you're having much more of a limited viewpoint because I would say in the elementary, sometimes middle schools, but definitely elementary schools, parents are very hands-on. They're
Yeah.
very a part of their
Yeah.
child's programs because that's just the developmental
I think
aspect of that
it's
child.
also of, like we started with, like it's so different for each person. Some people flourish with a homeschool environment
Sure.
and maybe even need it, but it's so different, and some people have different needs. But I feel like there's a lot of fear around homeschooling as well, because there's certain expectations, often the social aspects, etc. But the ones that I'm talking
Yeah.
to, or know that they're doing homeschool, they are very social because they
Mhm.
attend either online or physical or classes, or they do extra or sports or hobbies.
Yeah.
They are creative. I mean, they are social, and even back in the day, and still now, you can go out and hang out with the fellow kids outside, in the neighborhood. Like, of course.
Yeah, yeah, I actually know the Florida Aquarium, like, does homeschooling, or not, like, homeschooling parts of it, where you can bring your child and you can actually go get taught
Fantastic.
at the Florida Aquarium about different animals. So they have, I think that that's also becoming a lot bigger
Mm.
is, museums and public spaces are seeing that as, "Oh, we need to create that criteria
Mm.
around allowing for children to go through their interests or allowing for that sort of aspect to come into fruition."
I
So
think
yeah,
that's
agreed.
one thing that I think Norway and maybe the rest of Europe also should be better at. Like, because
Mm,
don't quote me 100% on this, but Norway, it's quite difficult to homeschool because there's so many laws that says like you have to send your
mm,
child to public school. But I was homeschooled for a while as a kid, and my parents had to take me out, like sign, like we that the school are not responsible for whatever happens to us, which is very
interesting.
interesting. And honestly, best 3 months of schooling I've ever had. But obviously, we went through all the same things and all of this, but like the focus was on me, and I could learn my own way. So when I first got back to quote unquote normal school again, I was ahead for the first time in my life of everyone else. Didn't last very long because they're like, oh, now you need to wait. But hey, that motivation really
Sure.
sparked the question: how do I learn then if I this worked for me, and my mom is dyslexic as well, so she can kind of like teach her ways with me, and I loved it. So that was really the spark that started me thinking, what do I need to do, and why
Yeah.
doesn't the school system give me that? And I think that's the core of like everything I do. I see all these children feeling trapped, and I'm like, okay, but what is it that you need to do to make your everyday life a little bit different, and take the responsibility to dare to stand up and use potential tools or talk to people that can help you, etc. And it's a daunting thing, but it's really for you,
Yeah.
right?
Yeah,
Yeah.
absolutely.
But then you asked a very good question earlier. How has it changed? Like from when did you start school, Courtney?
So let's see, this is dating me, but that's okay. So I started school in the late 90s. So I graduated in 2010
Mm,
from high school,
mhm,
2014 in college. Um, and so very, very different. Especially it's so apparent when I'm talking to my mentee
mm,
about school. And I'm like, oh, that's new.
mm.
No one told like that's strange, you know, that
Example?
you can't example. Oh, don't you worry. I have plenty of examples. Don't you worry. You can't use the good old, granted, I never used it because we didn't have a dog growing up, but you cannot use the my dog ate my homework
Uh,
anymore because of the fact that you're submitting things online.
mm,
You're having a lot more online assignments. You're having all of your textbooks online. You're having a lot of your grades online. So a lot of kids nowadays are having this very hyper technologically, I don't even know how to describe it better than that, but like very uber
mm,
technologically focused.
mm,
And that's awesome. But I still am that person that is like, I would rather, like when I'm reading some nonfiction books, though I love my Kindle and I read from my Kindle, the nonfiction books sometimes I need to have in my hand to read because I want to either write notes or I want to highlight things, or even I love the book, but sometimes it might be droning on and on. And I'm
mm,
like, how much longer do I have until I'm finished with the book? You know, so I can be
mm,
like, woohoo, I finished it. So that to me is how it's really changed. I literally had to ask my mentee, I'm like, do you guys still do yearbooks? Like, do you still sign your yearbooks? I don't know if that's still a thing. And she's like, of course we do. I'm like, okay, I just wanted to ask. Like, you know, you don't know anymore. Like, you know, if people are on Facebook or social media in general
mm,
all the time,
mm.
the yearbooks, those ways in which
Loses
people it's not,
value.
it
Yeah.
still is important, but you're right, like you're seeing pictures of events, Facebook or Instagram or whoever tells you all the time, like you were doing this 10 years ago. Whoa, that's crazy, didn't think about that. Like that's a whirlwind from the past. So I would say that that's one of the biggest things that has changed
Mm.
is just the uber like reliance on
Digitalization. Mm.
technology. Yeah.
Did you
Yeah.
did you where did you use any technology in while you went to school?
Absolutely, absolutely. Actually, um, we got to in middle school, we got to sign out laptops, or we got to
Mm.
have a personal laptop. Granted, again, that's not depending upon your
Mm,
socioeconomical,
of course.
space and the public school system having the funds to do that.
It's
My
wildly
parents specific
different depending
It's
on the school and
wildly,
state and everything. Yeah.
wildly different. My
And
parents
country.
actually yeah, my parents specifically actually moved from
Mm.
where they, like, started their marriage and their life to a different location specifically for the school system. Like,
Smart.
specifically so that we could have that, it was just a really well-known school system,
Mm.
and really, like, touted highly for being really great for education.
Mm.
So that's a big thing that I don't think is talked about. And I actually
Mm.
was thinking about this, Mads. I know it's a little bit off topic, but it's really not. Is I went to a career fair
Mhm.
on Friday and I
Mhm.
didn't even think about the privilege of myself having internet and having technology to be able to apply for jobs. They did have
Mm.
computers there for you to apply for a local county job, but I didn't even think about, like, wow, for to talk then about things like homelessness. It's not as easy for people to get jobs. Like, why don't they just get a job? Well, they don't have that privilege
Yeah.
to be able to go and apply for jobs online when the majority of the jobs are online nowadays. And so getting back to the school system, yes, I had a lot of technology at my hands. I
Mm.
had a lot of things that I learned,
Good point, by
but
the way.
thank you. I think it's really important to address
Absolutely.
because
Absolutely.
it all ties back. It all ties together when you really think about it. If you didn't have those means, if you're having most of your school go online and you're not in a place where it's great internet service or it's great, you
Difficulty.
don't have the financial means
To
to
have a
have a
phone,
family
yeah.
compute, yeah, or to have a family computer or whatever else, or everyone has to be on the same computer, that really
Limits you,
limits you
yeah,
in
yeah.
in your learning. And I think that that's why it's really important to address that. Yes, it's great that we have technology, and I am a huge fan of technology. I love the
Mm.
fact that you and I are talking and we are in two different
Yeah,
countries, right? Like
exactly, yeah.
that's the thing. And I love that I get to meet my mentee who lives in a different state than I do.
And that's
So
a
that
good
there,
point, actually, just to say that
yeah,
quickly. It's like we do superpower mentoring is over the internet, and it
yeah,
works. We are connecting
it
with people,
does.
so it's almost, yeah. This wouldn't be possible in the same way. Of course, you could meet up with people, but it wouldn't be the same because I have most of our mentees are in America, you know.
Right,
So
right.
the potential
Yeah,
is massive.
exactly, exactly. So yeah, I think that I definitely had that technology in high school and obviously in college. That was another thing in college. I went to this college or university that basically provided every single
Mm,
student with a laptop.
mm,
It was part of our tuition.
mm.
So there was not necessarily, and you could actually go to tech services at
I
my
get it. Yeah.
university to get it fixed if things were going wrong. So like I had those ways of really being a part of technology early on, and we were testing out the Surface Pros before they became Surface Pros, like the like prototypes, and we were doing all of that in college.
Mm.
So I think that yeah, there's a lot of great technology, and I've been very privileged to have that technology growing up. Yeah.
Yeah, yeah. Like we said earlier, it's not guaranteed because it differs so much to the from the
Yes.
school, the state, the country, etc. But Norway is pretty much the same. Like in Europe, because I work with a team, a research team about dyslexia around Europe, and we
Hmm.
see that like the Scandinavian countries, they focus a lot with technology to support dyslexia, etc.
Hmm.
And but other countries further down doesn't rely too much on technology, which is very fascinating to see how that impact their not only focus but also understanding of their diagnosis. So for me, I got when I got diagnosed with dyslexia in 2003, I was the first one in school that got a computer. No one else had a computer. I got all these
Yeah.
different tools like audiobooks and on CDs, and I got programs that could help me that was designed for dyslexics to like with spelling and stuff, which I find fascinating that those programs are not used as much in
Mm.
America and even in England. So in Norway, you have a lot of rights around technology that are specifically created for dyslexics. But again, I was the first one, so that brought a lot of problems because the teachers didn't like me
Of
using those
course.
things, etc. But it was very cool. But then maybe 4 years later, everyone started to get computers, and but then I become the techie dude because I already used it for so long, right? But
Right.
it's this revolution of technology to help those individuals with learning differences, but also in general. And I agree with you. There is something about maybe we have too much technology, rely too much on it. But I also feel like that's very depending on the teacher and what they are doing. But I think one thing you and I grew up with was the slow introduction to technology.
Yes.
That's not the case for
Yes.
kids today. They're like technology from the moment they're born. So they have a
Yes.
different understanding of it. And I think that massively impact how they engage with it.
Very much so. Very much so. I mean, I had to even ask my mentee, like, how do you do it? How do you go onto your computer and not immediately get distracted when you have
Mm,
all of this homework to do?
mm.
Because I know I would. I know I would at this day and age. I totally am the person who has the 50 tabs open at once. Like I don't worry, I close them all before starting. I put them all in this thing called one tab, so they all just go right into
Oh,
one tab.
but
It's
you
really
know
cool.
they're
I'll show.
there though.
I it's a set it and forget it. So like I
All right.
know, so it's like holding my place so I can go back to them whenever I want to, but
Smart.
I don't remember about them. But you're so right. Like so she actually said that because I have a female identifying mentee
Mm,
that she uses her iPad or her tablet because she can't see her other tabs open. Like she can only have one tab. So she's bioengineered it to work it with her brain.
Mm.
But exactly, you're exactly on the money. Is we had this slow introduction. I had dial-up for a while. Like it was dial-up internet where if you've never heard that sound,
I love that
everybody
sound.
who's everybody who's like a 90s, early 2000s kid will know what that sound is. I cannot replicate it because it's going to hurt the recording in general. But that, I think it really helped you to be very cognizant of how much time you were
Mm.
spending on the computer, because then your mom would yell at you like, I can't use the phone right now.
Yeah, true.
You couldn't. So there was this slow introduction. There was also, speaking about social media too, I know it kind of goes differently for schooling, but it is important, is you were already, most of the that Facebook and social media technology was being introduced around like my late high school years.
Mm.
So
Mm.
I had a lot more brain development of, should I post this or should I
Mm.
not?
Yeah.
Or even if I did, it wasn't terrible where you'd be like, oh, this is going to impact me literally a few years down the line when I'm
Mm.
applying for college or when I'm, trying to get a job or whatever it be. You really thought about it,
Yeah, because we were growing up with that mindset at all. So obviously,
right?
I think an extension to that is also, I remember YouTube being a thing, and I was like, wow, I can learn more about myself, learn more
Yeah.
about my diagnosis, because there were no information other than books, which I didn't want to read. But I actually found some books that because of YouTube, I started doing more research. And I think, and I always say that now to mentees and when I speak as well, like the library of technology and
Yes.
information on the social media is beyond anything that we grew up with.
At your
It's
fingertips,
so
literally
amazing.
at your finger. No encyclopedias that you
Yeah.
have to like
And
search
I
through.
even said to my mentee the other day, like, forget about like your teacher then. Forget about your book if you find that difficult. Find it's exactly that topic summarized on YouTube, or see if there's a podcast. And he ended up finding a podcast, and it's like, I love this subject now. Fantastic,
Yes.
because he's allowed to use his way of learning. And
Yeah. Yeah. And I think that it's important to also then you bring in critical thinking skills
of
of,
course,
is this true or not? Right. Because there's can be a lot of things that are online
100%.
that are not true.
And that's why you can use your book, right? Like, okay, this stands in a book.
Exactly.
What does it
Exactly.
say? And using that back and forward. And of course, like, I don't know about America, but here you can have those books on audio read to you,
Hmm.
but which I'm sure is the same. But also, like with the diagnosis in Norway, there are specific apps that are created to help individuals with dyslexia to read out loud, for example, or those who
Yeah.
needs to, even ADHD, you can apply for it and you can get that support. So there
Absolutely.
is, and I think that's the, as you just said, like there is a major technology advancement that could help, and I think that's the important thing, because we forget that we have the most amazing technology ever, and that's our body, which we do not acknowledge to the point we should, and usually we just like tense up, because that's how the experience of so many of these individuals. They
Yeah.
have a horrible time,
Yeah.
and then, as you
Yeah.
said, then they release that on the internet, and that's a whole nother story, right? But it's that balance between, yes, we have technology, yes, we need to use that, and yes, we don't know how that would develop in the future, but we still need to be in movement, using our body, being more in nature. I am shocked by how little certain schools are actually engaging with nature. That is
Yeah.
scary. um like it's because the teacher doesn't even know, you know, they
Hmm.
haven't done it themselves, which is insane to think about, but they
Yeah.
they're not taught, so why should they bring the students out? But obviously this changes depending on where you are and what you do, but that's a big thing, of course. But what do you know, or how were you diagnosed growing up?
So I was actually preparing for this question because I was really trying to think about it too. It was, so again, I will premise this by saying that I was, as my current therapist says, I was a chef's kiss. I was like the needle in the haystack
Mm.
as a female identifying person with ADHD,
Mm.
found to have ADHD. And I probably do have dyscalculia, by the
Mm.
way. I just don't, I never,
Which
that was
often
not a
comes with
thing,
ADHD diagnosis as
which
well. So
often, right. And I don't know that for a fact, but I'm pretty sure just from body and just how horrible math is for me and how difficult it is.
mm.
Um, but I, from what I can recollect, is when it first started, it was like first grade. I was not diagnosed in first grade, but I was taken out of the classroom quite a bit to work on reading comprehension skills with like a paraprofessional or with someone who specialized in that.
So they saw
So
you early
someone
on, basically.
so basically, they
Yeah.
were noticing that my reading comprehension, my writing skills, again, math was not as big until later on. I really did have issues with math though when I was younger. But I can tell you for a fact, like it was really interesting too, because like we were talking about at the very beginning, sometimes it's the information we need to actually learn.
Mm.
I was then second grade taken out again to work on reading comprehension. And I don't know what it was, Mads, about this, but we were reading The Boxcar Children. And it's a book about these children who, and I'm very cliff noting it because I can't remember all of it, but I do recall that like they were in the woods and they found this boxcar and they started to live in this boxcar. And there
Okay.
was something, and boxcar being,
Yeah.
a train, just in case people are, don't know what that is. I wanted to preface
Good.
that. But there was something about that particular story that just like lit up my little brain, my literal Courtney brain. And then you could not stop me reading. Like it
Oh.
was like a light bulb switch and I was on top of it. Like I had to be told by my teacher to go to lunch because I was just so enthralled in books. I don't know what it was that like really switched my brain to be like, I got it. Like,
It's
no,
ADHD
there's no problems.
obsession. Boom.
Literally, literally. And I was a bookworm growing up. I was that person. There was in America there, I don't know if it's called this for everything, but in my particular school, it was called Good Books, Good Times. And
Oh.
so if you read a certain amount of books, you got to go to a pool party and a pizza party, and like you got rewarded for
Oh.
reading a certain number of books. Of course, I excelled at it.
I
And
think we
like,
got stars or something. Good job. That's it. I never got that though,
um,
but
so yeah, it was one of those things where I just could not stop reading.
mm.
But I think what really got me was third grade, where we started taking more tests.
Mm.
And it took me a lot longer to get through my exams or my tests. And I would always be the last one taking my exams and I would be behind and everyone else would go to, do things and I was trying to finish up my exam or my test. And I think that that's honestly when I was diagnosed before that, but I think that and I can recall for a fact in second grade, I was diagnosed with ADHD because I would go to the nurse's office and get medication at
So
that
good early
time.
on. Yeah.
Yeah. But I didn't take medication
Mm.
after that year. It was only for 1 year that I basically took it. And then because it was the early 2000s, my mom didn't, and the only thing that was out there was Adderall at the
Mm.
time.
Mm.
My mom didn't want me to get addicted to it at
Mm.
that. Granted, it's very different
So
nowadays. So
different for everyone. Yeah, 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 yeah.
huge disclaimer of that was just my experience. And my mom just trying to do the best she could with
Yeah.
the knowledge she had.
There was nothing out there,
Um,
so of course.
Right, right. So in third grade was when I believe that that's when the 504 plan that is in America. There's two different plans typically for specialized learning, an IEP
Mm.
and a 504. And a 504 is basically just giving a kid accommodations, helping in certain ways. And an IEP is changing the actual learning environment and structure
Mm.
of the of kind of them helping along. So with the 504 plan, I then had I got preference to sit in front of class, in the front of class, so I wasn't distracted by sitting at the back of class. I got verbal and auditory notes like repeated to me quite a few
Mm.
times. I The biggest thing and the thing that I wish was in the workplace nowadays, just maybe shifted a little bit, is I got extended time on exams and I had a separate location to take my
As
exams.
it should be.
as it should be. It was
Yeah.
huge. It was a huge game changer for me because
Mm.
when I had extended time on my exams, I wasn't panicking that I only had 5 minutes left in the exam and I was still stuck halfway through my test. I could take the time. I also had, paraprofessionals that were in the
Mm.
rooms so I could ask more clarifying questions of what are they trying to ask in this question here. And that was just a huge game changer for me. I had that also moving forward in college. It was a little more, not as structured.
Mm.
And I had to kind of fight for that one because I didn't have, again, it was the early 2000s
Yeah.
that I was being diagnosed. So the criteria and I
Knowledge.
guess the knowledge, the multifacetedness of getting diagnosed with ADHD, and I'm just doing this because this is like
It's a
me
long
looking
list.
at that.
Yeah, yeah,
It's
yeah,
a long
yeah.
list, right? um, that wasn't as comprehensive as it was when I finally went to college. And
Mm.
so they were saying, oh, well, you don't have everything you need to get those special services. But
Mm.
then we talked about it. I had,
But you didn't have a
think
formal like on paper that you had it.
I, from what I understand, it was again through my like pediatrician. So
Oh,
that was how I was being diagnosed. I do recall going to like, I remember it was like a rainy day and like I had to go to the school to get tested by probably the school
yeah,
psychologist or somebody like that. But I don't think it was like as formalized as it is now.
yeah.
And I know in specifically like England in particular in the UK, it's much more difficult to get diagnosed. I know that for a fact just from what I've been seeing from content creators,
Mm.
what I've been seeing from people on LinkedIn, that
Yes.
sometimes it's like a 3 to 4 year wait just
Yeah,
to get diagnosed.
yeah.
So
It's a long wait
that's
list. Yeah.
yeah, yeah. So that was kind of my story. I also
Mm.
had structured study hall
What
in
is that?
specifically middle school. Yeah, so it's basically you're working on your work, right? So study halls are typically people think of it as a free period. You're able to do whatever you want for the most part, as long as you're not disruptive. But for me, for a structured study hall, specifically in middle school and high school, it was you were also working with another paraprofessional or with someone
Mm.
who understands what's going on in your classes. There's in the school system. So they were able to help me plan out, okay, you have this exam or you have this essay to write. How are you going to get it
Mm.
done?
That's
How are
good.
you going to work on it? Yeah. They could, if I had questions or if I didn't know how to work on this math problem, they could be like, okay, well, here's when your teacher is available. Here's
Mm.
when their free periods are. Go visit them or
Then I have
let's
a
work on
question
through
then.
that.
Is
Yeah. Yeah. Yeah.
before I share my side of it, have you seen a difference between like all these things in my opinion should be like that's how it should be now, but from your mentee's perspective, the support they get,
Mm.
is it similar from your experience
From my experience or what she's been told to me, like telling me, is she has an IEP. So we have a little bit of a different,
Mm.
origin story, if you will.
Yeah.
But I was the one to kind of suggest to her to go take her exams in a separate location,
Mm.
to go, work with her case manager, which basically helps, manage her IEP and like get her the services she
Mm.
needs. So that was something that I think there's more, even though there's less stigma around having neurodiversity, I think that at least from what she has expressed to me, there was stigma from other students of
Yeah.
like, why do I need to go to a separate location? What's going on here? So on and so forth. Um, but I don't think, again, I think that the way in which it's presented via technology, I don't think that it has that wide like
Mm.
swipe of helping in IEP or 504
You're
settings.
kind of on your own,
In
kind of. Yeah.
yeah, that's what it seems like. It definitely, from what mom has expressed, the guardian and the mentee, yeah,
Mm.
it's more of they are, they have a support system.
Mm.
She is a, an amazing human being in which she has that support system to help voice her up to her mom to go fight for her
Mm.
IEP settings, and the paperwork and whatever else too. So I think that that is something that a lot of parents don't understand, or not necessarily they don't understand, but that it sometimes can be an uphill
Yeah. Yeah. Yeah.
battle to
Yeah. Yeah.
get those accommodations.
You need to be
Um,
the tiger mom and
there,
tiger dad to survive and fight for your kid until they learn to fight for themselves. and because you really need to be full on fight mode, and that is exhausting.
Yeah. Yeah,
Very
and that's
exhausting.
actually so the reason also why my sister was in a different high school, from my understanding, was that my parents basically said she's not getting the accommodations and the things she needs.
Same thing happened
And
with my
so
brother.
she went to a different school that was
Mm.
specific for people with learning differences. And so it was much smaller classes. I think
Mm.
she had a graduating class of like 9 or 10 kids, like very much smaller, so that she could get the resources she needed in order to excel and succeed.
The luxury of being the youngest child.
She's
Yeah.
the middle
A middle
child, so she's
child, I see. I see. But she is younger than you, right?
only 14 months. We're basically
Still,
Irish
she's,
twins.
yeah, yeah,
Yes,
but
yes.
still, it's like you paved the way, and she got the benefits. No, no, but
Sure.
it happened the same thing with my brother as well, and of course we chose different things. But like he really needed, he went to private school for what you were saying. I guess maybe college you would call it in America. But my story, I was diagnosed with dyslexia in 2003, so I was in fifth grade. But as I said before, my mom is dyslexic, so she knew straight away. And at the time, in first grade, it was kind of like this movement in Norway where, okay, if they went from a lot of special schools and then they ended up putting everyone into like quote unquote normal school, and
Hmm.
then there wasn't a problem anymore because now everyone was together. Yay. Except that it didn't really work in the way that you still needed to provide support for these individuals. And I remember this woman come in, took me into a room and said, now we're going to test you to see if you're smart or stupid, and here
Oh,
is
that's
some
terrible.
puzzles. And the conclusion was, because I could do those puzzles and I could rhyme, then yay, I'm good. I don't have dyslexia, which is fair enough. Like the dyslexia, some individuals might find it difficult to do wordplay and stuff, but there is so much more than that. So I went undiagnosed for years, which broke me. But it was when my parents homeschooled me while we went to the Canary Islands in Spain and lived there for 3 months that mom taught me how to learn and how I needed things. And the key here, which is the good thing about having younger children, not younger children, but like siblings, is that my brother was a major part of this because he was born deaf. So obviously didn't hear anything, but he started to hear for some reason. The doctors are still unsure how this has happened, but he started to hear and then started to speak. Strangely, of course, when you haven't been hearing anything from until you were 5, then your speech is strange. But that meant he got a speech therapist. So when we got back, he was checked. He got the speech therapist, and I was checked for dyslexia by this person that
Oh.
also had the qualification to diagnose. So I was one of the first people in my school to be diagnosed with dyslexia, which was like, yay, cool. No one knows how to help me or teach me or anything. But my mindset was like, okay, but I need to take a responsibility for myself. So I was so obsessed about this is my opportunity to learn about myself. How do I work? How can I use these tools to teach myself? How and why do I need to fight my teacher? They put me on like a lone desk right in front of the teacher because he was like, do not cheat now, I'm watching you. So I had to fight a lot of needed a lot of courage to stand up for myself. But eventually that continued, and I did all right. But when I got to eighth grade, my math teacher was like, there is something here. There's something about you. I think you might have dyscalculia. And just to clarify, there is a difference between finding mathematics difficult because you may not have received the support you needed from an early age, which is then you can build this up with the right person and the right time and like everything, right?
Right.
With the right support and learning techniques. But with a dyscalculia diagnosis, you can still, of course, achieve. I got top grades because the teacher saw me, but the foundation of understanding mathematics is difficult. For example,
Yes.
holding the numbers in your head was a major
Yes.
difficulty for me, and just
I still count
understanding.
on my
Yeah,
fingers.
same, same.
I still like when I have to do a tip or whatever else, I'm bringing out my calculator on my
Yeah,
phone because I cannot compute.
yeah.
I have to use my hands to actually count. Yep.
Because
Yep.
just as often I say, that there is no number 10 here. The amount is 10, but
Yeah.
not, there. There's no symbol here. So connection between the amount of the on the symbol can be very challenging, and that affect like
Mhm.
time, and anything
Yes.
related to numbers.
Fractions.
Yes,
Fractions
I
were
never
really
learned that.
difficult.
It was so difficult.
I feel like I gained fractions because of actually when I got a lot older
Mm,
of cooking and baking and
yeah,
making, cocktails and whatever else because that's what I like to do in
yeah,
my spare time. And so then I understood it. But if you're like 1/4, well, I can then tell you it's 0.25 ounces because of just doing it repeatedly,
mm,
right? Like
mm.
that. But
And it's kind of, you
I
can
only
see it too. It's easier.
right.
Yeah.
Right, I can see it in both volume, I can see it both in, like, the actual weight, and, of course, in more, European because the US is weird with their measurements,
Yeah,
you'd use a lot of grams, right?
yeah.
So that's even more accurate than, say, ounces and,
All
cups
that
and
stuff.
whatever else too. Yeah, all that stuff. Anyways.
But a very good point. And like, so that helped me a lot because she not only accommodated for me in math, but in other aspects as well.
Yeah.
And that was very, very rare to get a diagnosis of dyscalculia, and it still is. That's still a
It's
diagnosis.
still
That like, what is that even? So
agreed.
unfortunately, but that kind of led me to standing up for more and more for myself. And I had to fight in college. I had to fight not the first time I went to university because my art school, obviously, they knew that, art, dyslexics, there are loads of them.
Yeah.
But when I went to do my special education, which both was in England, by the way, and I shout out to England in that sense because the first thing they did was to uh, was to test us for dyslexia or ADHD to see like has anyone been left out, and I thought that was very awesome. And before I continue, I was also checked again for dyslexia in the military. Military is compulsory in Norway, so I went there. And surprise, surprise, it didn't go away, but the techniques I had learned compensated for my dyslexia, which is
Yeah.
awesome. But when I went to take my master's, they were like, sorry, we don't accommodate for that because there is none. And I'm like, well, I have 5 in my classmate. It's like, they are here. But
Yeah.
obviously, the teachers we had was special education teachers, so we got support. But it's strange how majorly different it is. And I think, like you said, for the mentees, they are very different from state to state. But the thing that I'm most surprised about is how little use of support tools in other places of the
Mm.
world, and the encouragement to experiment. Like, okay, yeah, word spell check is great, but it's not tuned in for those who find words difficult.
Right.
So there's all these things, but it's and in for example, what's the word, Australia, it's seems to me like that's not much talked about at all. And it's again, it depends. Is it private? Is it homeschooled? Is it public school?
Sure.
But
Totally.
what on the subject of tools, really,
Mhm.
do you feel like there has been changes? Do you use, or have you started using tools later in life that you wished you had when you were younger, etc.?
Oh, yeah. Oh, yeah.
Yeah.
We talked before about how I wish I had this thing. It's called the time
Hmm.
timer. And what's great is it literally shows
Yes.
you how much time you have left. So guess what I bring
Hmm.
to I use this actually every single time my mentee and I talk. And you can actually have it so that it doesn't have sound or it
Oh,
does. So
okay.
you can switch it. So I make sure it doesn't have sound. Sometimes I have it on sound, because or else I would just keep gabbing.
Of course,
but
important.
I wish I had that. I talk frequently, and again, I know that it depends on how old the child is.
Of
I
course.
don't know what the not for time timer, but for this next item I talk about is called Focus Mate. So it's a body doubling, virtual body doubling with
What do you mean by
anywhere.
that?
So you know how you and I right now are on this recording?
Hmm.
It's kind of the same thing, but we both go on mute. You don't have to.
Hmm.
And we have a timer up at the top. I think it's the top, yeah, right side
Hmm.
that actually counts down. So you can set 25, 50, or 75 minutes.
Hmm.
And you get joined with someone in the world anywhere. And you can choose if you want just female only folks. You can choose if you want,
Oh,
everybody. You
wow.
can choose whoever. But then you both decide, you talk at the very beginning of the session, what are you planning on working on today? And you both then discuss what you're planning on working. And at
Gotcha.
the end, you debrief to say, how did your session go?
Hmm.
And so therefore, you are like, you can have them on the screen. You of course are on camera. But then it's just this great way to be like, okay, I've dedicated myself this amount of time to do this thing. And people, I'm not just, they don't just do, computer work. They are sometimes doing their dishes. When I was moving from an apartment to another, I purposely chose focus mates
Hmm.
to pack boxes.
Oh,
People are working out. People are deciding, I want to read my book. I want to practice my language. I want to do all sorts of stuff. So you're literally virtually body doubling.
so
And
people
so,
hold you accountable for the what you do technically.
yes,
Yeah.
yes. And if it doesn't go well, it's like, okay, it didn't go the way I wanted it to
Hmm.
because things happen,
Of
right?
course. Of
But the
course.
fact that you put the intention behind it
Hmm.
is what matters.
Hmm.
That you decided, I want to spend this time to do this. And I have gotten so much work done because of things like FocusMate. I'm trying to think of other implemented. I think that even like technology of using like noise canceling
Yeah. Yeah. Yeah.
items.
Yeah. Yeah.
I don't go anywhere without my AirPods because it's great. I'm trying to think of other what sort of tools would you say that you wish you had? I'm trying to think of other things,
Hmm.
but those are like
Well,
the main key ones that I
I
wish I
think
had.
for me, in terms of, I use my phone a lot now,
Mhm.
with like the timers and visual. Like I was for years afraid of making my own, or using calendars, because then I felt like I didn't have
Mhm.
time. But now I'm like, I need a calendar to make myself have time. But I hate the the apps for calendars. I am building my own in Excel, and having
Amazing.
that like accessible anywhere is amazing for me. And notes, it took me a long time to be comfortable making notes, but
Mhm.
speech to text,
Mhm.
fantastic. And it's even allowed to use, at least here in Norway, and I know England too, you are allowed to use that, instead of writing on tests. Use it like
Amazing.
every thing of technology today has a speech to text function. Game changer. But also, the more I worked, the more I realized that, my actual notes was my drawings, and then connecting that with whatever subject, but really allowing myself to focus on the things that works for me, and being comfortable without having anyone standing above me saying like, "Oh, no, you're doing it wrong." That, and from that also, not thinking that I need to keep all the ideas in my head. I can actually put them down, and now I can write because I am not in school. But often I'm just like, note blah 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 blah, right?
Yeah.
Game changer, game changer, fantastic.
I also thought of one too that for specifically driving folks,
Mm,
or in general, I can't tell you how much it saved me on my phone to, like you said, we're talking about calendars, right?
mm,
To
mm.
actually put that I have an appointment or I have something going on. But the kicker, especially because I have an Apple, so I can't speak for Android, but
Me
you can
neither.
literally put where you're going and
Ah,
how long it's going to take you. So like I can put in the address of where I'm trying to go to,
mm,
And it can predict when I say my starting location at my home, it can tell me this is roughly around the
Yeah,
time
yeah.
that it takes me to get there. But the kicker is then I know, okay, it's going to take me 25 minutes to get to this location. So what I actually do is I trick my brain, even if I know the appointment's at 11:30, I say, okay, the appointment's at 11:15, and I put it in my phone
Mm.
as such, because then the countdown of how long it's going to take me to get there is still the 25 minutes,
Mm.
right? But it's giving me a buffer so that if I arrive
Oh, that's
at
good. Yeah.
11:25, I'm still on time, because the thing that a lot of people with ADHD do not consider is finding parking, how long it's going to take you to get into the appointment place, how it's, if traffic is happening, how do you plan that? Do you
Yeah.
have alternative routes? You, how long does it take you to get out the door? Sometimes it takes you forever just to get out the door. I have a dog, so I have to consider, did I take her out to go to the bathroom before I leave? How long am I going to be gone? Did I put the security system on? All of these little
All
chitter
this thing.
chatters in my head, but just literally putting it into my phone, I
Game
could then be
changer.
like, game changer. I was supposed to have my therapy appointment tomorrow at 10 a.m. or it's actually Wednesday, but I have something that's happening at 11:30.
Mm.
Now, I know that my therapist and I sometimes run over because we're just chitter chattering because
Mm.
we both have ADHD. Surprise, a surprise, I know.
Perfect.
Um, but what I realize is if I'm scheduled at 10 a.m. for her, I actually would not have enough time
Mm.
to get to my place at 11:30 because I have to cross a bridge to get there because I live in a peninsula area.
Mm.
I have all these other things. So I was able to then predict all these things and put it ahead of time to be like, hey, I know we schedule ourselves every single Wednesday at 10 a.m. Oops, I scheduled myself for something else that I have to go to at 11:30. Can we move our time? So
Mm.
it's a proactive approach, not a
You're
reactive approach.
seeing how you need to be
Yes.
responsible. And
Yes.
you're saying
Yes.
something very
Yes.
important there, which many people kind of. I see a lot of people finishing school now have a problem with this because when you are in the school system, you are being told to go there and there, and you don't need to
Yes.
think about time. But then you go home, and the time just floats because there is no structure.
Yes.
And then you have this if you do work but you go to work, you do your thing and you go home, it's structured. But let's say you can't, maybe like my friend, she got a baby, she's not able to go away from the baby, so to say, but she got paralyzed because what should I do now, because her whole life have been structured, so she doesn't need
Yes.
to do those things or think about it, but now she can't do what she loves, so she's
Right.
stagnated. And I think the school system, which goes into the next thing, I would love for the school system to acknowledge, oh wow, you find this difficult, how can we teach you early on to be accountable and
Yes.
see how to, like,
Yes.
okay, structure, what do I do when I come home, how can I communicate to parents, friends, etc.
Study skills,
Yeah,
like
all
learning
these
how to
things.
actually study,
Yeah.
like that was something I really, really wish that I had learned. And it was like, cool, cool, cool. We're going to learn how to study.
Mm.
And then in our study skills class, we didn't really focus on that. Like we focused on other things. And so I was like, dang it, I didn't. So then I created these structures and things
Yes.
like later on in life, because what also people don't acknowledge is when you're in the school system, you have exactly what you're saying. You have these structures created. When you go to the workplace, especially if it's a corporate sort of
Mm-hmm.
structure or whatever it be, you lose. Yes, you have that structure in
There's
school,
no
but you
one
kind of
holding
have
your
it.
ears, so to say.
True,
Yeah.
but you also, I feel like, have more autonomy
Mm.
in some ways because especially when you get to high school, yes, you have certain classes you have to take, but you get to choose some of your electives. You get to
Yep.
choose what you want to take. College, it's the wild, wild west. You
True.
can structure yourself however you want to, right? So the problem you have is you go from these places of structure in high school, a little bit of autonomy, then you go to the place that is in college if you decide to go to college, huge autonomy. You have all of this time. You have all these things you want to learn. You have all this stuff that you want to like achieve. And then you have to go back to structure. And
Mm.
I think that that's what I have been learning as I've gotten older, it has been really difficult for me
Mm.
to understand. And that's why my mentee and I really talk about
Yep.
values. What do you value? Because that's going to help you with your trajectory
Focus and yeah, anything. Yeah, yeah, yeah.
and for what you want to do as a job or career, or what sort of classes would
100%.
you want to take. Because if you really value things, which I think a lot of ADHDers value autonomy, they want to
Mm.
have, yes, they can create their own structure, but they want to be in charge of their
Of course.
structure, right? They want to create their, so when you have those places where you're not able to necessarily create your own structure, we just we panic, we freeze. We're like, but my brain doesn't work this way. I can't do this thing that you're asking me to do at this time.
Mm. So learning.
Having
Oh,
that
oh,
autonomy
sorry, you were
in,
lagging. Go on.
yeah. No, 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 you're good. You're good.
Okay,
You're
cool.
good.
So technically, the last. Oh, I love what you said. I want to comment on in general. We need more everyday focus. Like, how do you pay taxes? How do you accommodate for yourself? Being responsible. All these things that the school system doesn't want apparently to teach us, because it would help everyone, really.
Literally.
And
Literally would help. A lot of that is the thing that a lot of people don't understand is when you have accommodations, or just in general, think about, people don't think about this, but how helpful it is. And it actually is brought up to me when I was at college, because I was involved in the disability service like
mm, mm,
association, right?
mm,
Just being able to press the button to open the door for, that's typically intended for people that are wheelchair
yeah,
bound, or that have crutches or other things that they don't have their hands, right? But it helps so many other people. The woman or parent that is pushing a stroller for a child, the person, again, having crutches, the person that has too many things in their hands. I don't know anybody, talk totally pointing at myself, that as the ADHDer that's like an octopus and
yeah.
carrying all the things. Those accommodations are there for an intended audience, but it actually helps everyone. It helps everyone.
It goes back to what I always say: dare to communicate more with the student. Better communication. And of course, yes, not all the students know because they've never been asked that question before.
Yes.
Make it okay to them to feel safe enough to communicate. And that takes some time, but that should be implemented. Like, okay, do you have what you need? It's okay. Okay, what can we do for you? Instead, you're getting the middle finger and you're being told, shut up, sit still. What are we doing? So
Yeah.
more, of course, everyone themselves should also be more responsible, taking charge. But if the system was also a little bit more accommodating, it can go a long way, very long way.
Yeah. Open communication, over
Yeah.
communication. It it can, it literally can go in every single aspect of your life, whether you are partnered or not, if you're dating out there in general, like those things, all of these like these things where we're talking about self-advocacy, talking about accommodations, all of these things come into
Make it
play. And I know I
so.
just
Yeah.
gave dating as like
Yeah.
an example, but
But it's good.
open and over communication is, I think that that's something where we're taught not to do. We're
Yeah,
not taught, we're
exactly.
taught to, again, be quiet, to, especially, and I will say for myself, and I can't speak for everyone, but for female, but identifying and bodied folks, um, that is something where that
Yeah.
society has taught us to be, more quiet and just agreeable,
Mm.
because not just for like what society wants, but for our own safety too. For our safety purposes, sometimes it is better to be more agreeable, which I'm not advocating for. But I
It's
say that
acknowledging it. Yeah, yeah,
it's
yeah.
an acknowledgement that sometimes it's not safe
Which
for you to
also
speak.
make it so you often are not seen to get ADHD, dyslexia, autism diagnosis because you're not outgoing, running around or speaking a lot of words like the boys are doing, right?
Right, right, right. And most of the studies for ADHD have been done on hyperactive young
Yes.
boys.
And that's not the
There,
case for
I
all
think
of them
the
either.
Right, exactly, exactly. And I think 2017 was the first time that it was being studied for women with
Oh my God.
ADHD, like the first time. And we're not even acknowledging, how for the school system too is, as girls are getting older because of puberty and adolescence,
Very
Their
important.
hormones are changing. So
Yeah.
therefore, they might have gone under the radar and might have been really struggling in elementary school, but they didn't, or they might have been doing really well in elementary school, vice versa. And then suddenly all these hormone shifts and puberty and their
Which
their
comes to a
brains shifting.
very, very important thing that I always say, especially when you have ADHD and you're on medication. The medication you had before may not work because your body is changing. I meet
Yeah.
way too many that come to me and say, I have pain, I'm depressed, blah blah. And I'm like, I am experimenting with different things. When is the last time you went and checked if the dosage, the amount, the type of medication you are on is working for you? And like, when I was 10 and now they are 20, I'm like, love,
Right.
go, please. Book that appointment because you are always changing. Even if something traumatic is happening, that can trigger your body to change, you know?
Yeah, literally. That's exactly that.
So I would love for us to continue talking forever, Courtney. But I hope our audience see that, yes, the school system has changed, and it seems like there's been a lot of good things too that have happened over the years to accommodate for individuals with learning differences, as I like to call it. Um, but I feel like there also is such a vast difference between where, how, whatever, who you are, when you are, etc. And I think in general we need to communicate better. Do you agree with the summarization of everything I just said?
Yeah, I would say that it's also, getting back to the basics, of
Mm.
asking what we talked about at the very beginning is how do you learn?
What's the
Being
motivation?
able to
Yeah.
yeah, what and asking yourself, "What will work for me?" And unfortunately, for a lot of things, it's you don't actually get the choice of like how you want to learn. But I will say the big disclaimer is that nowadays a lot of students and a lot of people we're in the information age. They have
Yes.
so much knowledge at their fingertips that you can advocate for yourself in many, many ways that might not look the linear way,
Yes.
right?
Do you find your own way? Absolutely. That's how I survived.
Yeah.
I'm sure that's how you survived as well. And that's
Yeah.
okay, you know? And it's, you need to explore yourself, but also be communicative so all the people can help you and be open. It's fine to ask for help. It's necessary. And I know that many find that difficult, which I'm sure you will talk about in an upcoming episode as well. But thank you so much for watching. Is there anything, can we find you somewhere, Courtney?
Yeah, so I'm trying to think of where to point people to. I am on LinkedIn. Just my name, Courtney Dobbertin. I'm also on Instagram as Scientific Siren.
Wow. Cool
Yeah,
name.
I know it's a very cool name. I got it like a few years ago because I wanted to actively avoid Instagram, not because of my own like trying to hide in the shadows, but because of my ADHD and not wanting to
Addictive.
get
Yeah,
distracted.
yeah.
Yeah, exactly. And then I'm on Facebook, and if you're a girl that scubas or someone that is a part of that outdoor environment space, would love to see you in Girls That Scuba too.
Awesome. Awesome. I'm sure we will find all this information about us down below. And, you can find me with the name Mads Johan Ogard anywhere. Basically, I'm everywhere, but especially on YouTube and TikTok. And of course, you are listening to the Superpower Mentor podcast. And if you are interested in having a mentor for your kids or your teens, uh, you can find more information about that on superpowermentors.com, I believe. And we will match you up with a mentor that has similar interests and understand your diagnosis and been through similarities as you. And we want to help you to, or your kid to, raise up, understand themselves, learn how they learn. And sometimes we just hang out, play, talk about life because that's what they need. Or other times we help them with the homework or whatever they need. So if that's interesting to you, well, check us out. And of course, save and share our podcast here. And thank you so much for listening and watching, for those of you who are watching us. So any last word, Courtney?
Not that I know of, but just that I have gotten so much out of Superpower Mentors as much as probably my mentees have as well. So know
Good.
that we are learning right alongside them in their journey, and that's all we want is just support them.
Couldn't have said it better. See you guys later. Bye
See ya.
bye.